Hi there, my name is Sammy Dagger, and I'm a student in CIS 476. Today, my design pattern is ASP.NET MVC Design, which stands for Model View Controller. The overview, some of the things I'm going to be going over are the definition and classification, the intent, the motivation, a real-world example, applicability, structure, participants and collaborations, consequences, related patterns, problems solved by the demo I have for you, the class diagram of the demo, references, and then the demo itself. The definition and classification. So MVC obviously stands for Model View Controller. It's a software architecture pattern used to design web applications primarily, but it can also be used for many GUI applications. It's used with numerous languages, with the most prevalent ones being .NET, Java, and PHP. The main focus of this pattern is to separate your domain, application, and business components. It's primarily database driven, especially primarily in the model portion of the pattern, where you have your methods for getting things from the database and things of that sort. The intent of MVC is to keep simplicity throughout your web application, and it's all about separation of concerns. So you have your model, which is all of your database access and your data itself. Your controller is an intermediary between your model and your view, and the view is just the UI layer. So the view ultimately gets its data from the model, and the controller are just some intermediary methods which can alter your data, grab your data, and display it to the view in the way that you want. Developers can work on separate tasks. So this is one of the pros that I'm going to be getting to later with MVC. The components are independent, and code is easier, and maintainability is also easier. The motivation of the pattern. So without the viewer or the controller, the data is still good. It's still intact. So as long as you have somebody who knows what they're doing with the data, they can do anything they want with it. So if you had a view or controller issue with your web application, you could restructure those without worrying about your data being affected, which is your model. And there's also no circular connection. So if you had a component A and component B, A can dictate what B does, but B does not rely on A. So there's no reliance between components in MVC, which is one of the benefits. And the integrity of the UI is always maintained. Nothing in the model or the controller can affect the UI. So the data might be different than what you expected, but things aren't being moved around or affected as they would be in other frameworks when it comes to web applications. And old data is automatically flushed out from the UI every time the data changes. So you're never left with old data in your view because everything is constantly being refreshed and flushed out. Your data in your UI is not really data. It's just a placeholder for data that's in your model. Our real world example. So let's say 3 layers of a business exist. You have your sales, manufacturing, and research departments. So your sales would act as the view component of MVC. The customer doesn't see what's going on within the company. They only see the final products, and new products are always for sale, not old ones. Your manufacturing is the controller component. So the manufacturing, they don't know really what goes on in the research side. They just pretty much do what they're told and transfer those things to the sales department. And the research is equivalent to your model view. This is where all your data is being compiled, your data is being calculated, and that is all being transferred to the controller in the MVC model and the manufacturer in this real world example. Applicability is to separate the model view and controller to engage in parallel programming so developers can work on different things at the same time without having to affect each other. For example, data scientists can work on the model portion, the data calculations. Developers can program the controller portion, and UI developers can program in the view portion. Your structure. This is a basic structure diagram, which you can see, all over the internet. Your model view controller. So your model has all of your classes, your objects. So in my model, it has students and classes, which are physical objects in your database, being represented by methods and variables in your code. And your controller is your getter and your controller has your getter and setter. So it's going to get things from your model, process them however you'd like to, and it's also going to set them. So if in your UI you have a checkbox that says check this off, and it'll change the name. It'll basically tell the controller to set something in the model as a new name. So they're all intertwined, they're all interrelated. Controllers full of mutators, things like that. Participants and collaborations. Your model is an object representing data or an even activity. For example, a database table. Your model objects encapsulate the data specific to an application, define the logic and computation that manipulate processes and data. Your model object can have one-to-one relationships with other model objects, and sometimes the model layer of an application is effectively one or more object graphs. Your view object knows how to draw itself and can respond to user actions. And the controller object, as I mentioned earlier, acts as an intermediary between your application's view objects and one or more of its model objects. Alright, so your consequences. One consequence is it's very difficult to convert an existing site. So if you have an existing site that is an MVC, maybe it's web forms, where your UI code and your UI code and your server code are separated, but each page has its own set. You're trying to convert it to MVC. It's going to be difficult because you have an independent set of code for each page, and you're trying to merge them all together under one roof. So that's going to be difficult. It has been done before. Also, MVC is fairly complicated to get going on if you don't know much about it. And also, with regard to customization of the UI, you have to do everything from scratch. So you have to have very good HTML skills. There's no drag and drop in the UI as there is with a lot of other frameworks. So it is hard to convert an existing site as well. Related patterns, as I mentioned, web forms, ASP.NET, where you have each page consists of a C# file and an ASPX file. The ASPX file is your HTML code with your ASP code, and that relies on the code from the C# file that's paired with it. So if you have 5 pages, you're going to have 10 different files, a pair of files for each page. So with this, it's very easy to create websites very quickly, but it's not good from a maintainability perspective, especially people going into your code that haven't seen it before. You've got just so many pages that do so many different things, so it is hard to maintain. Problem solved by the demo I have. It's a student registration application for university. There's a login process. And there's different pages. There's a students page and a class page. You can view all your students and view all your classes. You can add students and add classes. You can edit students and edit classes, and then you can add students to classes. Here's a class diagram from my demo. We've got controllers such as the students controller, class students, and your classes controller. Some of the models, you've got a model essentially for every controller. So you've got a student controller, you've got a class controller, and a class student controller. The class student is essentially students that belong to classes. So you need a separate table in the database for that information. Here are some references and time for my demo. Alright, so here's the code for my project, which I'll get to in a second. First thing I want to do is just go ahead and run it. Just going to run it in Microsoft Edge here. So this is going to load the login page. Alright, so I'm just going to log in. I've got my password saved already. And I will log in here. This is the home page, CIS 476 term project. Just some images below. I've got my login up top here, ability to log out. So there's two pages mainly. You've got your students and your classes. Click your students. I've already got some in here. I can edit them. Change my GPA to say 3.5. Change my birthday, 94. Save it. And the changes are reflected there. I can create new. Do Joe Schmo. January 2nd. 97. Okay, let's pick a freshman. Philosophy, sure. 3.8. Okay, so as you can see, pretty easy to add a new student. You can also delete a student if you want to delete Jane here. Are you sure you want to delete her? And it shows her details real quick. We can delete her. We can also go to classes. I've got two classes added in here, CIS 476 and CIS 495 2. So if I want to create a new class, I'll just put CIS 350. College is engineering. Start date. We'll do April 4th this year. Section 001. Alright, so if you click on details, you can see the details of it. You can edit it. You can also add a student. So if I wanted to add student number 1, I think that was my name. I'm going to click add, it's there. Oops, I have a breakpoint. Actually, I can just step through this and show you what goes on. This is in the controller class, so this is your class's controller. I added a method that says add student. So if the model is valid, store a class variable as a class with a specific ID, which is, let's see what ID it's looking for. It's looking for an ID of I believe it's 1. Let's see what it comes up with. Class, yep, CIS 476 comes up. It's looking for that specific student that I typed in. I believe it was my name. So I can hover over that. Yep, that's my name right there. So it's going to set the class instance. I have a class student class. I might as well go to this right now. It's a model. So I've got class student right here. So if you have 10 students per class, you're going to have 10 rows in the database for class student, which consists of your ID, your class instance, and your student. So what I'm doing in the controller here is I'm storing a class student variable dot class instance as this class, because right here this is a class variable and there's a student variable. So I'm storing, let me hover over this. Class instance is now equal to CIS 476, and now the student of this class student is now me. And now I'm going to add that to my database, which I created an instance of earlier. So I'll add that right there. And now I can see all of my existing, let's see. Well, I'm going to save changes first. And let's see. Now I can see my new class student with ID of 16, which has CIS 476 and me inside of it. And then it's going to return back to the index here. So the controller returns back to a view, which is an index page. And right here are my views. So since I'm in the classes controller, that's going to refer to the classes view folder and the classes index page. So that's what it's going to return to when I hit continue right now. So now I'm back on the classes index page. So essentially you've got, let me just close some things here. You've got your controllers here, your models, and then you've got your views. So for every model you have, like student is a model, that has a student's controller, and then there's a student's view folder. So at the student level, I've got my name, birthday, standing major, all of those things. And then also I have a database context here. And this sets up my database where it creates a controller. So once it creates the controller, I've got my index, my details, create, edit, delete, all of these things. And these are just manipulation of the data. And what it does with these, let's say it's edit. If the ID is not equal to null, it'll skip this. It's going to find an ID which I want to edit, and it's going to return view to the student. So return view means it goes from, like, let's say the student's controller, it'll return view to the student's folder and the details page, because the view returns to the details page. So everything is interconnected. Like our classes controller refers, it takes from the controller class and it refers back to this model, which is the class model. So everything's kind of integrated like that. Pretty simple program, but it really does make use of MVC and shows you how things are connected, and that there is a one-to-one relationship between your model, your controller, and your view, and it actually works very well once you get familiar with it. And that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching.